to my channel, and today I would like to paint some special flower. These are thistles. Actually, I got the big bouquet for the birthday of my studio, and after a week or two I noticed that all the flowers faded away, and this is the only one that had that much power to live further. So I decided to paint it, the greenery part, and for some of the flowers I'm going to use the technique of partial watering. So it's rather interesting topic, and the idea is to get this kind of a card. So let's start watercoloring. Let's discuss the colors that I'm going to use. So in general, when you look on the flower, on the thistle, you see lots of different blues and a bit of greens, but still they are not bright blues or greens, so they are a bit neutralized. And for neutralizing, usually we're using complementary colors. So first let's talk about blues and then about greens. For the blues, I've chosen the following colors: ultramarine, manganese blue, and lavender. So I used these three colors. Instead of manganese blue, you can use cerulean blue because it's the same hue as manganese, is a bit granulating color. Lavender and ultramarine deep or any other ultramarine, they're rather bright. That's why I'm going to neutralize them. And for neutralizing these colors, I'm using burnt sienna. A bit of burnt sienna, just one drop to the color, and you will see that lavender and ultramarine are getting a bit more sophisticated colors. If you want a bit of more purplish effect, you can also use ultramarine plus opera rose, something pinkish. For green, I'm using olive green because it's very neutral color comparing to other greens. If you don't have it, you can mix it out of ultramarine and yellow. And for shadows, I'm using the darkest color I have. It's indigo. It can be also paint gray, but for the darkest places, I'm using this one. So these are the colors, and we are going to start. Let's talk about the materials. And first, what is very important in the paper, I love Anne Muller watercolor paper. It's cotton paper. You can always see it on the block written. That's important. And it's 300 gram. I usually use the paper in sheets and just cut on the sizes that I like, but you can also use the blocks. Now let's talk about the brushes. My main brush for painting almost 90% of my plot is Skoda Perla number 12. I'm also using today some of the thin brushes to add details. You can check what thin brushes you have. I have several natural brushes mostly, so something thin that you have is just for some of the details. And on some places I'm using flat synthetic brush to remove the pigment, so to wash out, to lift the color. And to create the illusion of the needles, I'm going to use a palette knife, so just to scratch, to lift a bit the color. If you don't have a palette knife, you can also use your nail just to scratch, or you can also use something like plastic card or something like this. So you choose what was helpful, what you are going to scratch. I made the photo of my flowers. I definitely see that the light comes from the left, so the right side will be more in shadow. And I've chosen 3 of the flowers. These 2 will be my main flowers, so my point of interest, and these I will put a bit further, so I will make it more on wet paper in the technique wet and wet, so that it's just a supportive flower, not my main one. So this is the pencil drawing, and you can find also attached to my Patreon lesson. And let's start. So I'm preparing first the colors. Color number 1 is very light, very diluted lavender. Separately, I am taking cerulean blue or manganese, so it's a bit different hue of blues comparing to indigo. Ultramarine, a bit neutralized with the help of burnt sienna, so that I get a bit purplish effect, also a bit pinkish, then you will get even more purplish. This mixture that I'm doing now is very thick, so it's a very cream consistency out of 3 colors: pink, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna to neutralize. And this I'm going to use for shadows in my flowers. I will make flowers one by one, so I'm wetting one flower and then I paint it, and only after that I go further to paint my other flowers. So I'm not wetting all flowers together. So I'm just adding water to my upper flower, just clean water. I'm not touching this green part. When it's wet, I'm starting with the light, with lavender from right side. Also adding manganese or cerulean blue, whatever you have. It's a bit diverse. A bit of olive green to the upper part, because you definitely see that it's there. Also making some already very simple, very sharp already. And the last is the shadow color. The shadow should be thick, again cream consistency. Perhaps it's not enough, the amount, so I will mix more. Burnt sienna helps to neutralize the color so that it's not too bright, because for the shadow it's better that the color is not bright. On some places can be more of burnt sienna, but I do care that the light part is from the left. Then with clean dry brush, the same brush I'm making just pulling the color with clean dry brush to create the illusion of these tiny needles. For that, it's easier when you hold the brush a bit vertically, so not like this, but more like this. Again, very thick shadow. This is what happens when the paper is getting dry. I see already that it's not dark enough. I'm just adding some darker lines, some darker dots, sorry. Lavender for making more lines, a bit darker lavender. If it's too big brush, you can choose a smaller one. The same with me, I'm taking a smaller brush. And if I'm attentive, I will see that the flower consists out of lighter like hills, small hills, and then starts the needle. That's why I'm taking white mixed with lavender, but in general it's really very, very light color. White dots. And also with the palette knife, I can make some scratches to create the illusion of lighter needles. If you don't have a palette knife, you can use your nail. Yeah, so like scratching like this. For scratching, it should be still a bit of water in the paper, so it's a bit wet. And now I will start with green immediately. With indigo, adding a bit of shadows to some places. For that, I am looking attentively to my reference. On some places it's darker, closer to the center of the flower. On some places it's closer to the edge. So you just look attentively how it is. What's important is there is very bright light and shadow on this place, because the stem is very light. I'm removing even the color with clean dry brush. and taking the darkest dark I have in my palette. It's Payne's Gray. It can be also neutral tint, some of the colors that you have, and making it dark around. And on wet, I will make this flower. I love to use wet on wet technique for the greenery, but what's really important then, that the grass is not trimmed, that the grass creates some illusion of chaos because you cannot count really grass. That's why I'm using the technique of partial watering. So I'm not painting on dry paper and not painting on wet paper, but I make it wet partially. For that, I'm using clean brush with water. Oh, it's just drop, not a problem. And I'm adding water to the places I think I will paint. But what perhaps you noticed that I'm not rather accurate. Moreover, on some places I'm adding a bit of water strokes because I will see how everything will bleed and connect. So when it is wet, I'm starting with this further flower. Shadow. Illusion of the needles, and I immediately start with green. I know that it will bleed on some places. You also notice that, but that's what I love about watercolor, that you create the art together with watercolor. Not only you, but watercolor also works very hard. Now taking indigo and on some places adding indigo. I will take manganese color to make splashes. I'm holding the brush really vertically because when it's vertically, then you can make very detailed, very thin lines. Have much more control on the brush when you hold it vertically. And also a bit of in the middle. And do that one. It's not trimmed. Yeah, you remember about that. So one are longer, other are not that long. Here it's greenish. Very dark. So actually here you can see two different techniques, like with lots of control when you work on wet paper, but still you can control the edges. And another option is when you do like this. It's absolute chaos, but for those who love the chaos, it's very nice technique to try and also to grow in it. If you like the video, you can press like and subscribe, and you won't miss any future tutorials.